Hello everyone, and welcome to the latest Red Raptor Writes. Oh my gosh, it's finally here, the PlayStation 5. It's beautiful, it's glorious, and hopefully by the time this video releases, it's fully backwards compatible. Sony, make it happen. And look at that lineup. Spider-Man Miles Morales, a new Ratchet & Clank, Resident Evil 8, and wait a minute, what's this? Sackboy, a big adventure?
Oh boy, yeah.
Guys, we are getting a new installment in the LBP franchise. After 6 whole years of nothing, wait, scratch that. After 9 long, gruesome years of nothing, we're finally about to get another release. I've been a huge fan of the series since I was just a youngling. I've always wanted to play them with my friends and formed so many fond memories. Heck, I even spent buttloads of time 100%ing the first 2. Some of you may remember that the first 2 installments ranked 3rd on my favorite video games of all time list, falling only behind KOTOR and BioShock. But I've injected more time into these games than any other, spending countless hours hammering away at my own levels that got scrapped more often than not. Dreams has been filling this void in my life for the past few months, but I'm still excited to see how this Sackboy spin-off game turns out. Before I get to that though, I think it's important to look back on the previous 3 main LittleBigPlanets to learn from their successes and shortcomings. Dang, this is exciting! Let's dig this up. I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I wasn't a day 1 LittleBig fan. I played it once or twice with friends back when it came out in 2008, but I didn't buy it myself until the Game of the Year edition released over a year later. But hey, I got plenty of DLC for free, so maybe it was worth it. Even when I finally got around to owning LBP, I didn't play that much of it. I beat the story, but for some odd reason, I never cared to update the darn thing, so I didn't see the online features until who knows how long later. When I finally caved in, it felt like a vast expanse of the universe just exploded. The heavens opened and I floated around the Dreamiverse like a dream state. Okay, this is sounding super overdramatic, but you get the point. It was cool.
I like it.
The main story was fun and endlessly iconic. For the first time, you got to play a Sackboy, platforming through many different themed areas around the world. You met several funny looking friends and foes made out of cardboard and stickers. Then it culminated in an epic boss battle with the Collector, who spent the entire game kidnapping characters in the background. The icing on this cake of great LBP fun was the music. All those soundtracks and licensed songs were straight fire. When you completed that, literally millions of community levels were waiting for everyone to play. The fun never ended because of the enormous amounts of user-generated content. And you wouldn't be alone too. LittleBigPlanet always allowed a maximum of 4 players in any lobby. You could join a group of friends or total strangers and do everything you could do in single player. You can even build levels together. That's right, build levels. All those community levels you played were made with the blood, sweat, and tears of players just like you, except more talented. We may forget nowadays with Minecraft, Fortnite Creative Mode, and Mario Maker, but LittleBigPlanet pioneered creative games, being the OG. It's hard to remember cause it seems so long ago, but the original came out a full 3 years before Minecraft. Yes, simulation games like Civilization and SimCity had their roots decades prior, but no mainstream video game let you create your own worlds and games within the game itself. I would call LBP a great leap forward, but millions of people didn't starve to death when it released, so there's that. Yeah, the sequels added many more features and gameplay elements, but there was such a charming simplicity here. A stitched together feeling that the sequels lose in an effort to be more epic and elaborate. This is definitely the most intimate and nostalgic one for me because of it. In LBP, the slogan play, create, and share felt so true. Purchasing LittleBigPlanet was like getting 3 games in one. You got a fun 2.5D platformer with memorable areas, fun challenges, and catchy music, but also an in-depth game building toolkit where you can use everything you saw in story mode to create your own levels. And lastly, millions more user-generated levels to play. There was so much variety, like pure platformers, races, horror, action, and many survivals, but I'll touch more on that soon. You could do all this alone or with friends, all dressed up as their own cute personalized Sackboys. There was something for everyone, so you can see how players like me drained countless hours into it. Media Molecule's LittleBigPlanet was an endlessly exciting game that revolutionized the possibilities of gaming. Before I move on, I think it is important to mention that there's more to the series aside from the 3 mainline games. In 2009 came the PSP version. There was a PS Vita spin-off that I didn't put much time into, honestly. 2012 saw a racing game, LBP Karting, which was pretty much a Sack-themed Mod Nation Racers. And there was that weird prehistoric moves thing. So yeah, a lot of LBP history, but I'll only be covering the main stuff. Anyways, let's keep this going. On to the sequel. Okay, so picture this. You are MM, and you just dropped one of the most fun and unique games of the generation. Millions of people around the world are consistently playing and making their own levels. How do you top that? Well, initially, they didn't want to make a full direct sequel, but nevertheless, in the May of 2010, LittleBigPlanet 2 was officially announced, and on January 18th, 2011, it fell into the hands of millions of ecstatic consumers, including myself. So how did Media Molecule manage to top the original? Well, easy. More.
More! 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 More!
LBP2 featured even more content and improved upon the original in so many ways, making it the pinnacle of the whole series. We got a brand new story mode with more detail to plot and characters. This time around, Sackboy, now Sackthing, assembles a team of weirdos known as the Alliance in order to stop the giant vacuum cleaner villain known as the Negativatron from sucking up Craftworld and its inhabitants. Yeah, it's not complex like its infamous and Dead Space contemporaries, but it was as good as it needed to be, a fun and engaging enough jumping off point for a cartoony platformer. Yet the campaign was a step up from the firsts, as the original was a very loosely connected series of events to play through. Also, voice acting and cinematics found their way into the sequel, allowing for more storytelling capabilities. Instead of reading quick exposition off a character's mouth, we got cutscenes filled with comedic dialogue and characterization, adding much needed personality to the handful of characters our Sack came across. As opposed to piles of cardboard with a mouth, the characters transformed into Sackbots, little robots you can program with different behaviors, control, and dress however you wanted. Perfect for cutscenes. So we saw engaging characters like Larry da Vinci and Clive Handforth. The gameplay itself also saw a lot of attention with several new features. In the first LittleBigPlanet, we were able to play around with upgrades such as jetpacks, along with a paint gun and scuba gear with the DLCs. The sequel greatly expanded on this with the Grabinator, the grappling hook, and the Creatinator, which allowed you to shoot any object that you wanted out of your hat. Dr. Doofenshmirtz would be so proud. Also, launch pads were included as a sort of trampoline mechanic. These gave a lot of variety to the gameplay, but how could I forget the Controlinator, the single item that changed LittleBigPlanet forever. The player can hop into the Controlinator and control anything and everything the level creator wanted. No longer were you limited to just a Sackboy, but able to play as literally anything from a caterpillar to a spaceship. Create mode saw huge expansions too, with all the aforementioned features being available to the player, plus the introduction of logic. Lots and lots of logic. The number of creative tools tripled with gates, microchips, movers, and the like. The world fell into our fingertips. On top of all the tools, costumes, items, and materials being carried over from the original, this skyrocketed the potential for complexity in levels, letting creators make anything their brains were big enough to handle. The first LBP saw the creation of different style games, but they all still felt like LittleBigPlanet levels. With the introduction of all these new creative tools, suddenly anything was possible, to the point where you'd forget that you were still playing LittleBigPlanet. The sequel let players build first-person shooters and strategy games and retro games. LittleBigPlanet 2 was an empty canvas for us to paint on with enough time and dedication. So you can probably see why this one's my favorite of the bunch and why so many fans hold it in such high regard. Unfortunately, this was peak LBP, so things only went down from here. As with all good things, the greatness of LittleBigPlanet had to come to an end. Now, you might be surprised to hear me say this, but the decline of MM's creation didn't come with LittleBigPlanet 3. For the sake of the analogy, the community was already a burning building, but the release of 3 was Mr. Incredible.
It's psychotic. They keep creating new ways to celebrate mediocrity, but if someone is genuinely exceptional...
The problems began with one standalone feature, a feature so baffling I can only wonder why it was invented in the first place: the copy button. Any Sackboy who spent time surfing community levels has come across the option to copy another player's level, allowing you to publish it as your own. If you didn't want other players stealing your levels, you could have turned this option off, but still the damage was done. Maybe it was for friends who wanted to share the credit on a level or something, I don't know. But what ended up happening was that the same handful of levels were being copied over and over again.
Again and again and again until we're both dead.
All you would see on the cool levels page were endless shark and bomb survivals and Mortal Kombat levels being exactly the same as the last, and you would have to hear that same godforsaken scream over and over and over. One name who always came up on the cool pages was none other than Latin Player 10. Latin Player was the most hearted creator ever in LittleBigPlanet, but was notorious for spamming copied levels and getting all the attention for other people's creations. For years, the community was in an uproar over this, and as a 12-year-old at the time with nothing better to do, I was so invested in the drama. It was the most interesting thing going on at the time, aside from complaining about Benghazi. Good times. Now I've gotten over the salt, really just being amused at this point from the thought that someone was able to game the system so well. But still, entertaining content grew harder and harder to find, with nearly everything being a copy, so players became less interested. With the community getting more frustrated and the sequel losing relevance, it seemed as though this chapter in gaming was coming to a close. That was until the surprise announcement of a third LittleBigPlanet that looked awesome from the trailers. I mean, we were getting 3 new characters to play as, even more gadgets, and 13 more layers to build levels with. I thought LBP3 would be just the thing to bring the struggling community back on its feet, but as we all know, that didn't happen. In fact, it splintered the community further. You see, by the time 3 released, the PlayStation 4 just came out. Instead of making it a PS4 exclusive, LBP3 released on both PS3 and 4 to cater to those who would have been left behind. The problem was, you couldn't crossplay. So friends who had the game on PS3 couldn't play with their friends who owned it on PS4, essentially dividing an already shattered fan base in half. Also, remember how I mentioned several times how LittleBigPlanets 1 and 2 were developed by Media Molecule? Yeah, it's almost as if there was a reason for that. So after the wonderful sequel, decided to step away from the series, instead choosing to develop a PS Vita game called Tearaway and a little obscure something you might have heard of called, I don't know, Dreams? Dreams is a topic for another day, but trust me, it's awesome. If you haven't played it, change that.
Stop it. Get some help.
Leaving sacks and stickers behind, Media Molecule passed the baton to Sumo Digital, a small development company that mostly only worked on sports and racing games at this point. The decision proved, what's that word again? Oh right, fatal. At launch in 2014, LittleBigPlanet 3 was a mess. Even as I speak in 2020, 3 is still a mess. It was and still is one of the buggiest games I've ever played, to the point where it barely functions. I don't even have to go through patch notes to discuss this. I've seen enough to adequately describe this train wreck. Levels can still take a solid minute to load, and even then, you might just get an error anyways. Also, backing up data works fine, but the moment I try to download my saves, it crashes my PS3. I know this because, long story short, I backed up my saves, had to create a new user on my PS3, and I couldn't download any of my creative levels again. Sometimes my level progress doesn't save, so I've had to redo the first chapter all over again. And bugs constantly riddled my creations, hindering my plans, my hopes, and my dreams. It didn't matter anyway, since no one would have gotten past the heinous loading screens. So lame. To be fair, which I desperately try to be, there is still a lot to appreciate about 3. It didn't add as much as 2 did to 1, but got pretty close. Plenty of awesome features got added, like the ability to make your very own power-ups. Awesome. Teleportation was once again awesome. Lots more creative control over materials. Awesome. More layers. Awesome. Rails were neat, but I never utilized them as much, so less awesome. The sack pocket let you carry all the power-ups at once, which was nice because we got some cool upgrades like the blink ball, which let you teleport to certain spots. The pumpinator gave us the ability to blow or suck objects for puzzles, and man, I'm sure they had to be ultra careful how they phrased that. The illuminator was, well, a flashlight used to find more items. And finally, the boost boots let players double jump to reach high platforms. These were all nice surprises, but none of these things were the biggest addition. Nope, that title belongs to the 3 new playable characters who help Sackboy along his quest: Oddsock, Toggle, and Swoop. The main story of the game is to find these 3 heroes to help defeat this lightbulb dude Newton and his unleashed titans. Oddsock is my favorite because he's adorable. I mean, look at him, a sack puppy thing. His levels are also the most fun, having to wall jump and bounce around like a happy puppy. Then there's Swoop, a bird sack who flaps around the level and even dive bombs. You didn't use him too much in the campaign since he came towards the end. In the middle of the story came Toggle, who I saved for last only because he's the least interesting, and I have some problems with his abilities. Toggle is able to grow and shrink. That's about it. The game tries to make him look useful by basing puzzles around this mechanic, but compared to wall jumping and flying, it's pretty lame. But there's a feature that baffles me. This might sound like nitpicking, but Sumo Digital really fails at physics here. When Toggle is big, he sinks. When he's small, he floats and can even run over water. Anyone with an education past the 7th grade should understand this isn't how buoyancy works. Whether or not an object floats is a matter of density, not weight or mass alone. Water has a density of 1 gram per milliliter. Anything more dense sinks, anything less dense floats. Density equals mass divided by volume. If his mass increased but stayed small, then he'd become more dense and sink, but that's not the case. If his volume increases proportionally to his mass, which is implied, then Toggle would stay the same density. A big Toggle would still float. Simply put, a 3 gram penny sinks for being more dense than water, but 5 pounds of driftwood floats for being less dense. The developers of Sumo Digital apparently didn't graduate middle school. Okay, that was a fun mini rant. Wasn't I just praising 3? Oh yeah. At this point you get the gist though. LittleBigPlanet 3 added a ton of new and exciting features for me to unleash my creativity with, but I couldn't enjoy any of them because of how buggy the game still is. Sumo Digital was not ready to handle a full LBP. They tried to build a great skyscraper of so many cool ideas, but over a foundation of sand. Yeah, it didn't end well. Like that, the once amazing series known as LittleBigPlanet died along with its community of millions. In the grave it lay dormant for 6 years, until... Finally, after 6 long years of nothing, we finally just got an announcement trailer for the LBP spin-off game, Sackboy: A Big Adventure. I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm excited, I really am, but I have mixed feelings going in. Like always, there are positives and negatives. There's a ton that I'm looking forward to, yet some things I either want clarified or that straight up concern me. First of all, I'm excited to see that the franchise isn't dead. That makes me happy. I'm glad to see an attempt to reform the ashes from my childhood. From the 2 minutes we have, there's a nice blend between the old and the new. There are a lot of nostalgic holdovers from the main trilogy, but at the same time, plenty of new features. The new fully 3D gameplay looks like a cool change that I'd be happy to experience, but then we also see some 2.5D going on. The trailer shows some old power-ups like the grapple hook, and some new ones like a hamster ball and Iron Man looking flight. The levels seem to have the same approach. We get to glimpse a gardens-themed area, plus some new places. Mix that with some new gameplay mechanics like punching and classics like bubbles, and you've got a great blend of exciting new content and nostalgia bait. A perfect way to resurrect the dead series. What worries me though is who's developing Sackboy. Sumo Digital. Yes, you heard that right. Sumo Digital is back after killing the series. The guys who didn't graduate middle school. Before, when they added a bunch of new content, the game still came out a broken mess. Tons of new stuff is in the spin-off, but we know from experience that's not enough. I don't want to walk into the new game anticipating disaster, but I have to acknowledge the fact that the same thing may very well happen here. A lot of cool additions in a game that barely functions. At the same time, maybe they've learned from their mistakes. Maybe they've learned how to make a working LBP game in these past 6 years. Maybe having this time to develop will make for a solid gameplay experience instead of rushing out an entry for the PS4 release. Who knows, but I think we should be prepared for disappointment just in case. Also, we haven't seen anything about community levels or create mode. 2 fundamental aspects of the series have been left unaccounted for. Although this is just the announcement trailer, Sumo doesn't need to show off everything, but these are still a must that hopefully get confirmed soon. Most of the fun I can remember playing LittleBigPlanet has been in create mode, either making unfinished levels or messing around with friends. Also, my fingers are crossed that the multiplayer stays untouched. The last generation of consoles has made a strong push against local multiplayer. The originals were very free and non-restrictive, so I'm praying this doesn't get limited. We do see 4 players in the trailer, so that's a good sign. Sumo Digital just needs to not screw this up, and maybe the franchise will return to its former glory. If it does well, perhaps an LBP4 is in the future. We can only hope. Overall, I will remain cautiously optimistic for the Sackboy spin-off. It's time for Sumo to redeem itself. The LittleBigPlanet series is something I've loved for over a decade now, pouring more hours into it than any other game. I have so many fun memories with them, whether it was playing with friends, creating levels, or surfing the community levels. There was always tons of enjoyment to be had. Nobody wants LBP to come back more than me. It was literally my childhood, so I'm glad to see it return to some degree. Moving forward with this spin-off and maybe future main entries, it's important to look back at the previous installments and learn from their successes and failures. This series has had many ups and downs that developers need to learn from. Yeah, it's been disappointing to not have a new game in my hands for 6 years now, but hey, this pause has given myself, the community, and hopefully developers plenty of time to reflect on the series. We can slow down to remember the wonderful times we had. The first LittleBigPlanet was a super enjoyable platformer that revolutionized user-generated content in games. Its sequel took everything great about the first and expanded upon it in every way imaginable. And LBP3 failed to live up to its massive ambition. Now who's to blame for the downfall is up to you. Do you blame Sumo Digital for making a rushed mess? Media Molecule for going to Dreams and allowing endless copying, or Sony for rushing a third installment and leaving inexperienced developers in charge. Whatever the case may be, I'm hoping everyone can learn from this downfall in order to create a much brighter, happier future with Sackboy and the LittleBigPlanet series. Don't screw it up, guys! Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to please leave a like, subscribe, and check out my social media. See you next time.